If you've ever felt worse after sex with someone that you actually care about, hollowed out, anxious, desperate to know that you're still okay with them, the question under that feeling is often older than the relationship, and it's one that we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at the shame and anxiety spiral that often lives at the heart of anxious attachment and what it's doing during sex in particular and after it, and why that reassurance never quite reaches the place that we need it to get to the most. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Cindy Darnell, sex and relationship therapist, working with all kinds of people in all kinds of relationship configurations all over the world. And on this channel, we have the conversations that many of us are having inside, but not out loud. Here, we talk about relationships, desire, intimacy, connection, friendships, emotions, grief, and what gets in the way. And if that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. So let's get started. So the question running underneath everything, at the center of anxious attachment, underneath all of the behavior that gets labeled as clingy or needy or too much, is the question that your nervous system is asking on a loop. And often it's not conscious. It's just a permanent low-grade feeling of uneasiness that you're too familiar with and you wish wasn't a constant companion. But it's there in almost every interaction that you have, especially with people who matter to you. Am I safe here? Am I wanted here? Do I belong with you here in this moment? And while the science is out about exactly what the origins of attachment wounding is, and even the degree to which it affects us, it does seem very likely that it is a combination of genetics, early childhood experiences, developmental opportunities, privileges in life, and the degree to which we have been able to adapt over the years. But regardless, if you're someone living with relational anxiety, you know all too well that the intensity of your body's internal alarm is strong. The system on alert is almost always monitoring, assessing, protecting, and always yielding and checking because the cost of being anything other than acceptable simply feels too high. But sex puts that question of validation under enormous pressure because sex is where the exposure is the greatest and where the need is most visible, where the desire to be accepted can't be managed or minimized or kept at a safe distance. And for someone whose nervous system is already primed to ask, am I safe here? The intimacy of sex doesn't quiet that question, because if anything, it amplifies it. So most conversations about anxious attachment focus on the anxiety, which you probably know, the hypervigilance, the monitoring, the activation. But anxiety and shame, especially in this context, aren't two separate things running on parallel tracks. They're woven into each other so tightly that pulling them apart doesn't reflect what's actually happening inside your body. So anxiety is the alarm. It's the system that's scanning for threats, reading the room, assessing whether the bond between you is still intact. And shame is the story the alarm is built on. That deep, largely pre-verbal feeling that if someone sees you fully enough, they'll find something that confirms that you were right to be afraid, that you are too much, or that you aren't enough, or that you're fundamentally difficult to love. Anxiety keeps asking that question because shame has already written the most likely answer. So when you're in bed with someone that you care about, both of those things are running at the same time. So your body is there and the closeness is real. And underneath all of it, that alarm is going and the story is waiting. It's watching for any piece of evidence that confirms what the story already believes. A shift in their expression, a moment where their attention seems to be somewhere else, or the way that they respond, or that they don't respond to something that you did. And the alarm catches it, the story absorbs it, and by the time the sex ends, you're already somewhere else entirely. So the spiral that follows sex often gets the most attention. But it's worth understanding that for a lot of anxiously attached people, the spiral has already started before the sex ends. So you're physically there and you're present, you're in the room, you're in the bed, you're in the encounter, but you're also running this continuous internal audit. So you're tracking your partner's engagement, you're monitoring their responses, you're assessing whether the connection feels solid or is there something a bit uncertain, whether you're doing enough or whether something has shifted. So that cognitive layer, the thinking layer, and the nervous system layer underneath are both active and they're both working hard, even as the body is supposedly in the middle of something that it wanted. And this is what makes sex with anxious attachment so exhausting in a way that's often hard to speak about. Because you wanted this and you reached for it, and now that it's here, there's a part of you that can't take it, that can't accept it. Because landing would mean letting go of the monitoring, and the monitoring feels like it's the only thing that's keeping you safe. So the intimacy that sex offers is exactly what the shame story has taught you to be most careful about. That the closer someone gets, the more visible you become and the louder the question gets. And now that they are this close, will they still want to stay? So just take a moment and notice if something is tightening in your chest as you're listening to this. That recognition is information. And you don't have to do anything with it right now. I just want to invite you to notice that it's there. Take a breath and allow room for it to exist. We're not trying to push it away. We're not trying to do anything with it. We're just taking a breath and letting it be there. Okay. So when sex ends and the physical closeness starts to drop away, the system that was being held together by proximity, so by touch and adrenaline, that has nowhere left to go. The buffering has gone. So often, what arrives in its place, that flatness, the sadness, that sudden kind of hollow, empty feeling, that's kind of an irritation, this irritability, that is the body coming down from the effort of holding on to all of this at once. So this is sometimes what gets called a post-sex drop. Some people in certain communities might call it post-nut clarity. And it's genuinely physiological. But what's happening is the nervous system is releasing what it cost to be that exposed. And for people who are anxiously attached, it doesn't arrive as a clean sense of awareness. It often arrives entangled with the question that's been running the whole time. The drop and the monitoring and the shame story, remember, all land together. And so then the result is this epic quality of post-sex anguish, and it can feel completely disproportionate to what just happened between you. So you might feel suddenly certain that something is wrong without being able to say what. Or you might find yourself going over the encounter in detail, looking for the moment that things shifted, or the thing that you did or that you didn't do, or the sign that you missed, or you might feel an urgent need to close the distance that seems to have appeared from nowhere, or that you want to be held, you want to be told that it's okay, or you want to have the question answered, even just for a moment. And then that person beside you, who may have no idea that any of this is happening, they're just lying there. So the reviewing that follows sex in anxious attachment isn't as much a thinking problem, and it isn't as much of an overthinking problem in the casual sense that people usually mean. But it is the nervous system doing the only thing it knows how to do when that question feels unanswered, and it's looking for evidence. So if you can locate what went wrong, then you can fix it before anything bad happens, right? You can identify the moment the thing shifted, you can address it. And then if you go over it carefully enough, the uncertainty might resolve into something that you can manage. And this is a pretty logical through line, right? And if it were real, it would be a completely coherent response, given what the system believes about closeness. Except that the difficulty is that this analysis is running on a story that we made up rather than on what's actually happening between you. So the story has already interpreted the data before the review begins. You're not actually looking for what happened. You're looking for confirmation of what shame has already decided. And you know what? You're going to find it because our minds, our anxious minds, are primed to find evidence of rejection. We are very good at finding something that can be read that way. So a slightly distracted response, a moment where they seemed elsewhere, the way that they rolled over, the speed with which they checked their phone, that shame story doesn't need much. You know this. It is, in the worst possible way, very efficient. So what follows this analysis then, and this is probably familiar, is usually the reach. Are we okay? The checking in, the monitoring of how long they take to respond, what their tone sounds like, whether they seem warm or slightly off. The need to have that question answered to get the confirmation that the bond between you is still intact, or to hear from them directly that you're still wanted. And so when it arrives, when they say, yeah, we're fine, I still want you, everything's cool, something in you settles. The alarm quiets and the story loses its grip briefly. But here's what makes this so hard to sit with. That reassurance doesn't reach the place where the question lives because it addresses the present moment, this person, this relationship right now, but without touching the story that has been generating the question for years, possibly for decades. So the relief is real, but it's temporary. So then the alarm resets, right? And then the question returns. And then the next time the closeness triggers the system, and oh my goodness, the whole thing starts again. So over time, this creates a relational dynamic that both people feel the weight of, even if neither of them has the words to describe what's happening. The person asking for reassurance gets more frightened as the reassurance becomes harder to access. The person providing it gets more exhausted and may actually start to pull back slightly, which then the shame story reads as exactly the confirmation it was always waiting for. And that spiral tightens, and the distance it was trying to close gets wider. So reassurance can hold you through an acute moment, and that is absolutely valuable. But the question underneath anxious attachment, am I safe? Am I wanted? Do I belong here? Or any variation on that, didn't come from this relationship, which means that this relationship alone can't solve it. The story that shame built was constructed from previous experiences and previous things that were real. Perhaps inconsistency was real. Perhaps the reaching out and not being met was real. The system that learned to stay alert was doing something intelligent with this genuinely difficult experience. And that's where the work has to go. Not into managing anxiety more skillfully or finding a partner who gives more reassurance, but into making contact with the story itself, into developing a relationship with the part of you that learned that belonging was conditional and that visibility was dangerous. But that kind of contact happens slowly. It happens in therapy when there's enough safety to feel the old story without being swallowed by it. It happens in relationships where someone stays steady long enough that the nervous system begins to gather different evidence. It happens in the small moments where you catch the spiral early enough to name what's running, not to stop it, but to know what it is, and then to feel the room around you and the breath in your body and to notice that the threat the alarm is responding to belongs to another time and another experience. So if you can, take a breath right now that goes all the way down to your belly. Not because it fixes anything. It's just a way of letting the body register that it is still here, that we can talk about hard things, and that we are, in this moment, still okay. Now, the cruelest thing about shame in anxious attachment and sex is that it most intensifies in the moments that you're closest to what you most need. So, the more that someone matters, the louder that question gets. The more intimate, and I mean genuinely intimate, not sexy intimate, but intimate, the more intimate the encounter, the more exposed the story feels. The closer you get to genuine belonging, the more the alarm insists that it's about to be taken away. So you're reaching for connection and monitoring it simultaneously. You're in the most physically close position you can be with another person, but running an internal audit at the same time. You're wanting the reassurance and already bracing for the moment that it won't really be enough. This is what it costs to carry shame and sex together. And the reason it matters to understand it clearly is not to fix it in a single session or to resolve it by the end of a YouTube video, but to learn to actually see it. And it's that you can't find your way out of something that you can't see and you can't name. So that spiral will keep running until the story underneath it gets enough contact to begin to slowly change. And this work is available to you. It doesn't look the same for everyone, and it doesn't happen on a schedule, unfortunately. I wish I could guarantee it. But the fact that you can recognize what we've been talking about today means that the part of you that's ready for something different, it's already present and it's already listening. If this is landing for you and you want to go further, there's a few ways that we can work together. My book, Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, is a great place to start if you're somebody who is a reader. But if you're looking for something more personal, I offer coaching and counseling for individuals and groups and polycules. Or if you would like a more structured path, you can move through it perhaps in your own time. My online courses are built exactly for that. And links to all of those services are in the description below. I really appreciate you being here, and I love making these videos for you. Let me know in the comments how this landed for you, what came up for you, and any questions, perhaps, that you have based on some of these experiences that you got today from watching this. And also let me know, are there other videos you would like me to make more of? Put that in the comments too. I guarantee you won't be the only person thinking the thoughts that you're thinking about these things. And of course, as always, like and share this video. Share it with somebody that you think might appreciate it. Share it with your partners, friends, lovers. That's what teaches the algorithm that these videos are worth watching, and goodness knows, the algorithm is unfortunately something we are all beholden to. But anyway, I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.